Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission briefing on Colombia. This commission last held a briefing on peace and human rights in that country 6 years ago. A lot has changed. I welcome our outstanding panel of participants, two of whom are joining us from Colombia. During more than half a century of violence, Colombia was the longest running conflict in Latin America. It produced one of the largest numbers of displaced persons in the world. The historic signing of the 2016 peace agreement between the Colombian government and the FARC represented an important milestone on the journey to peace. But a written document does not bring about peace on its own. This requires investment and implementation over time and political will to build a better country. Colombians have worked hard for peace in the long term. The United States has been an important partner, providing technical assistance and foreign aid, and supporting the work of academic and civil society institutions like the ones represented on today's panel. Colombia has been one of the top recipients of U.S. foreign assistance over the past 25 years. We are invested in a safer, more secure, and more peaceful Colombia. I've traveled to Colombia many times. I've seen some of the results of this investment in Bogota, as well as in communities all throughout the country. In addition to the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration into society of some 13,000 former FARC combatants, the 2016 peace agreement created transitional justice institutions designed to sustain a just peace. This integrated system included tribunals to bring accountability for those who committed atrocities, and a unit to search for those who have been disappeared. It also included a Truth Commission, whose 2022 report gave voice to tens of thousands of Colombians in the country and around the world whose lives were affected by the conflict. The Truth Commission's report recognized the importance of the peace agreement while underscoring that the violence would only go away once the underlying root problems are addressed. It concluded, and I quote, "In order to resolve them, we need to be a society that makes the pain of the victims our own, that says no more, that takes on the task of transitional justice," end quote. Both the peace agreement and the Truth Commission report were important steps forward, but their potential has not yet been fully realized. And I am worried that progress in Colombia's peace process is moving in the wrong direction. Human rights defenders and social leaders are still being killed with impunity. Illegal armed groups have fragmented and grown in number. Much of the violence comes from them fighting each other for control of territory. And just last year, more than 58,000 people were forcibly displaced from their homes by the violence, nearly half of whom were Indigenous and Afro-Colombian people. What worries me most from the perspective of the U.S. Congress, though, is that we have been turning away from our leadership role in supporting and investing in the consolidation of peace in Colombia. The Trump administration has eliminated USAID, interrupting midstream so many programs that were working to improve peace and security in Colombian communities. The recent reorganization of the State Department has weakened our ability to lead on human rights and peace. This makes Colombia, the region, and the United States less secure and less prosperous. The impact of these cuts is most apparent when we listen to the stories of those directly affected by them. One organization had been working with rural women who were victims of the armed conflict in the southwest of Colombia to provide training and loans to encourage entrepreneurship and help communities develop alternative sources of livelihoods. A member of this group said, and I quote, "The news of USAID's shutdown hit us like a bucket of cold water. It wasn't just the 150 women we were training who were harmed. Our organization was also harmed because some people no longer trust us," end quote. The harmful ripple effects of the U.S. walking away from being a reliable partner for peace in Colombia go beyond the affected programs. It erodes our credibility and it puts at risk the trust that we built with communities all over Colombia. We cannot afford to abandon Colombians, and we should continue to support the peace process. It is essential that we continue to lift up the protection of human rights defenders whose lives are at risk. Today, we have representatives of civil society organizations who have been at the forefront of building peace in Colombia to share their knowledge of the challenges and opportunities they face on the ground. Many of them are longtime friends. We will hear ideas and policy proposals that Congress can follow up on. The United States and Colombia are key partners, and I believe strongly that we can and we should do more to help improve the situation in the country for peace, security, and human rights. I thank all of you for joining us here today. This is an important topic. This is an important briefing. I now turn to our moderator, Claire Silke from the Congressional Research Service, who will take it from here. Claire?
Thank you, Congressman McGovern. Good afternoon. My name is Claire Silke, and I'm a specialist in Latin American affairs at CRS, now covering Colombia. I'm honored to moderate today's briefing, which I hope will let our expert panel of witnesses discuss the implementation of the 2016 Peace Accord, lessons learned from how Peace Accord implementation overlaid with the Gustavo Petro administration's Total Peace Initiative, challenges facing the Colombian government and peacemakers in Colombia, including their personal safety, and how other entities or donors can support peace efforts. This still includes a role for the US government and for Congress, but at a time when US funding may be declining, what other entities might be able to also support efforts in Colombia. So the Peace Accord, now part of Colombia's constitution, enabled the demobilization and reintegration of 13,000 former FARC fighters and created unique mechanisms, many of which the Congressman mentioned, to identify and redress human rights violations committed during the armed conflict. Several aspects of the Peace Accord are noteworthy. For example, the peace negotiations built upon decades of community-level peace-building efforts, many that took place in Afro-Colombian and indigenous territories. Victims played a key role in the negotiations and in drafting parts of the agreement, including the gender and ethnic chapters. Notably, displacement and violent crimes committed during the war disproportionately affected Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities. In the area of accountability, we've talked about the transitional justice system broadly to enable reparations, justice, and protections against further violations for victims and their families. If perpetrators confess human rights violations and other conflict-era crimes, they committed to the Special Jurisdiction of Peace, or known as a court known as the HEP. Often with victims present, they recounted and often apologized for the crimes that they committed in order to receive, in exchange, shortened and alternative sentences, some of which involved doing community work in the communities that they once persecuted. But as Congressman McGovern said, we had the Truth Commission report, which is comprehensive and is meant to prevent future violence and human rights abuses from occurring. And there have been progress on all the fronts in terms of the Truth Commission, the unit to search for the disappeared, and the HEP. But each of those entities has in turn faced challenges that have slowed progress. After several years of lower crime and violence rates after the accord took effect in around 2017, violent crime has increased in Colombia over the past, it's difficult to say exactly, but 2 to 3 years, particularly in rural areas that were once affected by the conflict. Illegally armed groups, some with political agendas, some more criminal in nature, are continuing to fight to control territory, including in former FARC-controlled areas, for drug production and trafficking, but also other crimes such as illegal mining, alien smuggling, and others. When President Petro took office in August 2022, he pledged to build on the peace accord by engaging in a total peace initiative to negotiate with the remaining armed groups, both with and without political agendas. Total peace has faced numerous obstacles, however, and most of the, I think, 9 negotiations that were ongoing have faced or have either stalled or continue to face challenges, particularly after groups like the Gulf Clan have attacked security forces in rural communities. Massacres of civilians, killings of human rights defenders, and forced child recruitment are some of the human rights challenges that Colombia is currently facing. Some analysts also assess that the end of funding from the U.S. Agency for International Development, formerly the largest donor supporting peace accord implementation, and I think their aid totaled $1.5 billion or so for the peace accord implementation, is likely to hinder progress. And in June, following the attempted assassination of Miguel Uribe, a leading 2026 presidential candidate, Some observers, both within and outside Colombia, have expressed concerns about a potential return to past eras of extreme political violence. Today, we have an expert panel here to discuss these and other related topics and to reflect upon the future of the peace accords in the context of Colombia's upcoming elections scheduled for 2026, the political polarization in Colombia, as well as shifts in U.S. foreign assistance policies and tension in U.S.-Colombian relations. Our witnesses include and will speak in the following order. Angela Ramirez is the Executive Director of the Barometer Initiative in Colombia at the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. She's a lawyer who has worked in academia as a consultant for various organizations and for 7 years in the public sector in Colombia. Monsignor Hector Fabio Henao has been the Episcopal Conference of Colombia delegate for the Church-Colombia State Relations since 2022, and is also the director of the Institute for Peacebuilding Foundation, FICOMPAS. He currently serves as the representative of the Episcopal Conference of Colombia in peace dialogues with different armed groups, such as the ELN, CNB, and others. Jimena Sanchez is the director for the Andes and is a human rights and anti-racism advocate at the Washington Office on Latin America, where she directs their work on Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. And finally, last but not least, Marino Cordoba is the founder and legal representative of the National Association of Displaced Afro-Colombians, AFRODES, which brings together more than 126 organizations and community councils. He is also the founder and member of the National Afro-Colombian Council of Peace, CONPA, and the Ethnic Commission for Peace and Territorial Defense. Angela, would you like to start out? Thank you.
Of course, Claire. Thank you. Good afternoon, co-chairs McGovern and Smith, distinguished members of the Commission, and all participants. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important conversation. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, part of the Keough School of Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame. We've been involved in Colombia since 2016 peace accord was signed. In fact, the accord itself mandated a role in section 6.3.2, asking us to design a methodology to monitor its implementation and provide technical support both to the Commission of Monitoring, Promotion, and Verification and to the International Verification component. On the ground in Colombia, our research team works daily to monitor implementation. We gather, validate, code, and analyze data, and we engage directly with local authorities, civil society, and international partners, all with the goal of helping advance a more effective and evidence-based implementation process. But what have we seen until now? Let me start with the numbers. Our team tracks 578 commitments in the peace accord, and as of May of 2025, 34% had been fully implemented, 20% were in intermediate stage, 37% were still at a minimum level, and 9% hadn't started. According to our methodology, this means that nearly half of the commitments, 46%, those at a minimum level and those that have not initiated, are facing serious challenges in reaching full implementation within the 15-year timeline Colombia set for the peace accord implementation. There has been progress. For example, the percentage of fully implemented commitments has doubled since 2017, from 17% to 34%, but we've seen a slower pace in areas like rural reform, political participation, and drug policy. These are foundational parts of the accord that remain significantly behind. Beyond the numbers, there are important trends we have observed. First, the FARC has transitioned into a political party, and most accredited former combatants remain engaged in the recuperation process, over 9,500 of them. Only about 2,500 have left the process, and that does not necessarily mean they return to violence. Second, the Colombian government has built much of the institutional and legal infrastructure needed to implement the accord. Around 90% of the commitments have been formally initiated, but turning those formal starts into real change has been difficult. This is due to a combination of factors: unmet targets in specific programs, political transitions, institutional fragmentation, security, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which for nearly 18 months reoriented national priorities and significantly impacted the functioning of the state institutions. Third, the commitments tied to peaceful coexistence and reconciliation have been especially difficult to move forward, While the accord lays out a long-term vision of rebuilding trust and promoting nonviolence, many of those provisions are still pending. As you mentioned, the recent assassination attempt against Senator Miguel Uribe shows just how deep unresolved tensions and structural violence still run, and how much work remains built lasting peace. Looking ahead, we see three areas where continued U.S. support can make real difference. First, targeted support for key commitments, especially rural reform and drug policy. Today, more than 31,000 conflict victims live outside Colombia, nearly 6,000 in the U.S. And while migration declined after the signing of the 2016 accord, the numbers have started to rise again since 2022. Fully implementing point 1 on the rural reform is essential to reversing this trend and creating real alternatives to displacement. At the same time, supporting the Accord's drug policy commitments is critical. Cocaine production rose by 53% in 2023. The Accord includes tools to strengthen control over chemical precursors and fosters collaboration between governments. These mechanisms can help prevent diversion into illicit markets, reinforce the rule of law, and provide greater legal certainty for international companies. Second, continue diplomatic engagement and technical cooperation. U.S. support has helped build state capacity, strengthen civil society, and improve rural development. And these are not short-term projects. They're about creating a more self-sustaining and peaceful Colombia and opening up long-term opportunities for trade, investment, and job creation. Third, to support independent monitoring, the Accord includes strong transparency mechanisms, many of which are monitored by our research program. These tools promote accountability, reduce corruption, and help protect international investments. In conclusion, the Peace Accords offers a clear roadmap for advancing peace, stability, and opportunity in Colombia. Continued U.S. engagement, grounded in partnership and shared values, can play a meaningful role in supporting its full and lasting implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monsignor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Representative McGovern and all the members of the Senate and representative of other institutions. Let me speak a little bit about a particular point of the agreement between the FARC and the government signed in 2016. Well, we think that participation of the civil society in general is a key issue when we implement a peace agreement. And in this case, the participation of the society in general is focused on, in particular, on the national, regional, and local peace councils. That councils are very pluralistic body of the society, is part of the big structural participation in Colombia. But in this case, we have the representatives of all the sectors of the society. I mean, the whole society represented by sectors in the peace councils. That means that when we speak about the peace councils, we are speaking about strengthening the democracy at the local and regional level. That is one point I want to stress. It's very key to give the voice to the people to discuss about different conflicts and situations they face in their own regions and give advice to the local authorities. They are present in the peace councils. Recently, we had a very important meeting in the southern part of Colombia, in the Cauca department, with the regional and local peace councils. And it was very clear that in the middle of the difficult situation they are facing, due to the confrontation between different illegal groups, they have a very key role to engage all the society, to engage all the different sectors, in particular the vulnerable population, but everybody, to push the society and to push in general the situation to go forward and to overcome the situation and to design a plan for coexistence and reconciliation. So this is very key point to strengthening the local democracy. It's also very important that we have the peasants, women, members of the academy, and also members of the local and regional state governments. I mean, they are engaged, they are part of the councils. On the other hand, you have the civil society, but they all together have the opportunity to reflect and to discuss, not to take the whole decisions the government must take, but the idea to engage and to give the opportunity to the people to explain their positions and to give to design solutions. Third, here the idea is to strengthen also the institutions of the state. I mean, is to strengthen the positions of the local institutions and regional institutions to contribute to the peace policies, to create peace and reconciliation policies at the local level, and that ensure more security for the people. This is very focused on democracy, but also on the issue of security. For them, it's important to avoid the illegal groups, to take the voice of the communities, and to manage also to drive the local communities to fight, to take position against the order and the society in general. So this is very important in that sense. On the other hand, we are convinced that if we strengthen the participation of the society through the local and regional councils, that will give more tools to the authorities, more tools to the local institutions to have a clear idea how to implement better policies and strategies in favor of the people to remain in their local or regional territories. I mean, the people will be not internally displaced probably if they have more opportunities to engage everybody in the same body as it is the local peace council. We have also those which are responsible to give answers to peace building and security in the territories. They are over there. So I mean, members of even of the army, etc. Usually they take part. Usually they listen the voices of the people over there. They have the opportunity to speak with them. But for the people, the most important issue is reconciliation. As Representative McGovern says at the beginning, we are a very divided society. We are extremely polarized, and this is important body to ensure the society will together have the opportunity to reflect and to have a common idea. Coming to an end, I will say that we have been accompanying 140 local and regional councils to strengthen them, and also the national council. And we had the possibility to support their initiatives, their very key initiatives on protection, security for child, women, people on risk, victims, etc. So we have been in capacity to strengthen their possibilities through our program, which is called Compass. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jimena?
Mute. Hello. First, I would like to begin by thanking the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for the opportunity to speak at this important briefing. The relationship between the U.S. and Colombia started 203 years ago and has strengthened over the last 25 years. Both countries have mutually benefited in a broad set of areas, including trade, migration, education, labor, and ethnic rights. The U.S. has invested well over $10 billion in Colombia, and it is its most important security partner in the region. While there are different opinions in the U.S. on where to place the emphasis, support for the country has always been bipartisan. From the late 1990s to 2016, U.S. assistance prioritized counter-narcotics and security efforts. While some believe that Plan Colombia was a success story, this approach was highly flawed. It led to grave violations, including extrajudicial killings, and it did not ultimately defeat the FARC or drug trafficking. A shift was made towards seeking a politically negotiated end to the conflict, culminating in the 2016 peace agreement. The U.S. supported this effort with the U.S. Special Envoy for Peace, USAID, Congress, and UN playing important roles. While the peace agreement may be flawed, it ended an over 5-decade-long conflict and demobilized 13,000 guerrillas. With over 9 years since its inception, the accord is entering its final 5 years, designated for implementation, and our colleague at the Kroc Institute did a great job at explaining where it stands. Under the Duque government, the peace agreement as assigned was not advanced. The negotiations with the ELN were halted and illegal armed groups proliferated. Under Petro, the total peace policy, which integrates lessons learned from prior demobilization and peace efforts, consolidates peace into territories, and streamlines peace efforts within the state, is advancing. With a little over 1 year left in office, the Petro government is juggling 9 different processes. There are 6 negotiation processes, dialogues, and 3 socio-legal tables, each at a different stage and facing different situations. However, the truces and ceasefires negotiated through these processes have reduced violence. 200 combatants agreed to demobilize in Nariño, and efforts are underway to establish 3 temporary location zones, ZOOTs. Colombia is going through a complicated and unstable transition. The country's politics are divided. Election season is nearing. The recent assassination attempt of a presidential candidate has stoked fears that Colombia could revert to its dark past when political assassinations were rampant. Although peace has progressed, there are obstacles. It lacks the congressional support it needs and the legal framework necessary to advance negotiations with groups that do not have a political recognition. In the haste to broker peace, mistakes have been made. Each peace process follows its own approach, and there's little coordination among the different efforts. According to Pares, as of May 2025, Colombia experienced 603 violent incidents in 17 regions. When the same period in 2025 compared to 2024, we compared the two, we see a 45% increase in violent events. OCHA reports that from January to April, the humanitarian situation worsened with more than 953,000 people affected. And they say that on average, the violence impacts directly 7,900 persons each day and over 238,000 each month. Catatumbo, Cauca, and Chocó are areas experiencing such humanitarian crises. Each situation has its regional dynamics, is influenced by the status of negotiations of the illegal groups present there. In January, Catatumbo, located along the Venezuelan border, saw ELN and FARC dissidents engage in a violent battle to control illicit economies, leading to one of the worst displacement crises in recent history for Colombia. 80 or more people were massacred and many confined. 800 fled to Venezuela. Despite an intensive military effort, militarization, and negotiations with the 33rd Front, the situation is far from resolved. In June, southwestern Colombia experienced over 24 separate violent attacks in one day. In Cauca, local groups report that there's a deliberate effort by the illegal groups to exterminate the ethnic leadership, high levels of forced recruitment, and zero effort to prevent harming civilians. Humanitarian agencies operating in Cauca report many obstacles and said that in 2024, there were at least 43 humanitarian emergencies affecting over 39,000 people, half of whom are women. More have occurred in 2025. In Chocó, the situation is critical. We see urban violence in the Quibdó suffocating people, and we see that few people are willing to speak out due to death threats. There is little trust in the security forces, as some of the members have ties to illegal armed groups, namely the Gulf Clan. In 2025, Impasse reported that 88 social leaders and 28 former combatants were murdered. We at WOL are constantly putting out urgent actions, asking for intervention from the international community to protect people. Despite the obstacles, victims and communities continue to clamor for peace and advocate for negotiated solutions. The Colombian government, however, needs to prioritize and intensify its implementation of the 2016 accord. It should evaluate the feasibility of the processes underway, advance the ones with the most progress, and put in place plans so that the next government can continue them. Meanwhile, the dialogues taking place must negotiate humanitarian accords that protect civilians. The negotiation table should serve to make humanitarian pacts that already exist a reality. And the Colombian government has also to figure out a way to advance these processes without compromising its security policy. The 2016 agreement, as mentioned by everyone before me, is still the best framework for addressing deep-seated structural problems. And it has, in its short time period, deepened and diversified Colombia's democracy. There are no quick fixes for these structural issues, which require long-term sustained support from the U.S. international community. Without the peace agreement and a central role played by the UN in Colombia, the situation would be more adverse. The recent abrupt cuts in foreign aid are definitely a major setback. Unlike most parts of the world, in Colombia, there is an effort to end conflicts, violence, and structural roots of societal problems through negotiation and community participation. And there's a huge effort underway to address the rights of victims. The U.S. has invested a lot of peace in Colombia. If it wants to see stabilization of conflict areas and integral state presence in regions that curb illegal groups and illicit economies and contains criminal networks from spreading to other countries, it should continue to support the Colombian people. To prevent migration, peace and humanitarian assistance are needed to integrate migrants and to avoid out-migration. Part of the solution to the violence of Catatumbo, Choco, and Cauca depends on the long-term process outlined in 2016 advancing. Recent stated goals of the U.S. government state that there is interest in mitigating irregular migration, supporting rule of law, democracy, strong institution, and countering narcotics, terrorist organizations, and human trafficking. To achieve this, peace needs political and financial goals, and also political and financial support to multilateral agencies and civil society so it can be consolidated. Congress needs to appropriate the necessary aid to non-security efforts required to achieve these goals. Lessons from the past, as during the time of Plan Colombia, prove that security assistance alone does not resolve inequality, which is the root cause of conflict and criminality. In many ways, Colombia's transformation is a global success story. So this is not the time for the U.S. to abandon efforts in Colombia. If the U.S. distances itself from countries like Colombia in the region and only engages with them within a narrow view of security, it risks those countries forming alliances with countries that the U.S. itself sees as economic competitors, such as China.
Okay, thank you so much, Jimena. You got to a lot of what I was going to ask you in the questions, so that was great. Marino? You need to turn on your microphone. No se escucha.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank to the Lantos Human Rights Commission for the opportunity to share my perspective on the human rights situation in Colombia. I would like also to recognize and appreciate Congressman Jim McGovern leadership on issues related to Colombia, human rights, and global justice. Yo quiero saludar también a todos los compañeros, hermanos de Colombia que nos escuchan o nos ven. The war in Colombia has generated a deep humanity rift by violating fundamental rights and causing constant fear in communities due to the assassination of leaders, targeted killing, and the use of explosives in urban areas. These incidents, which are on the rise in the country, limit the community's autonomy and their political organization. This constitutes a violation of human rights and infringes international humanitarian law. The Colombian government is forced to seek peace is supported by the community living in areas where the war is taking place. although the result have not been as expected, we understand that we must continue to persist. The war is worse, and we are tired of its negative effect. Since the signing of the peace agreement in 2016, we have learned that achieving peace is one thing, maintaining peace is another. It requires persistence, political will, regardless what the economic or political sector think. Peace in Colombia translates to peace in the region. Achieving peace in the region will help to reduce wage or immigration from Colombia to the United States. Colombia is one of the countries where USAID, in his work with civil society, demonstrated important results. USAID supported the peace agreement and played a very important role in its implementation, especially in rural areas occupied by poor population. It helped ensure that any community, Afro-Colombian and Indigenous, had a voice at the peace negotiation table. And ultimately, their ethnic leaders were able to negotiate with the negotiating parties the ethnic chapter of the final agreement. An alliance between Afro-Colombian and Indigenous community comprised of the National Association of Displaced Afro-Colombian Afro-Des and the National Organization of Indigenous People of Colombia, ONID, supported by USAID, called the Inter-Ethnic Alliance for Peace, was a model worldwide. The purpose of this project was to implement the ethnic charter. It was implemented with 15 community councils, 24 indigenous reservations, 18 ethnic organizations, 5 women's organizations, and 10 youth collectives that supported communication initiatives in territories. This program sought to strengthening the autonomy of the ethnic communities in their territories, as well as the self-government and economies of Indigenous and Afro-Colombian community in 5 municipalities in Colombia, contributing to reconciliation, ethnic inclusion, economic development, cultural promotion, and peace building in their territories. The aim of USAID not only affected thousands of workers with whom we implemented programs like this, but also affected many communities and many social sectors in Colombia that receive support from the United States government in order to avoid growing coca leaves or migrating from their countries, even to avoid being recruited by armed groups and drug traffickers. Given this reality, and understanding that the United States is an important ally, it is essential to continue forgiving bonds of brotherhood and solidarity. Years of work building alliance with community have roots that cannot be uprooted without considering the social and political consequences. Ethnic groups are more visible today in Colombia, have achieved political participation, and have improved their living condition thanks to the financial support provided by USAID. The solidarity support received from the Congress, civil society, and the United States government itself. Never before in Colombia history have Indigenous and Afro-Colombian community achieved such visibility or so much social leadership and political participation. Finally, I would like to suggest the following topics for the communities: strengthening the organizational capacity of Indigenous and Afro-Colombian community to strengthen their capacity to defend and promote territorial and human rights, as well as build and implement territorial peace. Second, promote the development of community economies to foster food security and income generation through economic activities consist with local productive potential. And third, support from the United States is very important to the mission of the Land Restitution Unit, an entity in charge of recovering land that were stolen from the ethnic community. And this government, under the leadership of Director Giovanni Juliet, nearly 94,000 hectares of land have been handed over to Afro-Colombian and indigenous community, and a joint effort with ethnic leaders. And this was the vision that we supported and worked with USAID in Colombia. USAID had been developing with this local community to guarantee their protection, the food sovereignty, and support the return of the land confiscated by armed groups. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. As written in the chat, we're happy to take questions from the audience. And so if you all want to submit them using the Q&A function, then I'll be able to see them and direct them. You can either direct them to a particular panelist or to the entire panel. I have a couple in case it takes a moment for people to get going. But I was wondering, Marino, it sounds like you and Jimena touched on this, but how do you see it as in the U.S. interest why is it so important for the U.S. government or for other donors to continue to support Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities? You touched on, or Jimena touched on some migration issues, but also the land where Afro-Colombians and indigenous peoples live. Can you describe a little bit about how that overlaps with where the armed groups are active and whether or not it's in the U.S. also security interest? I don't know.
Jimena, you want to start?
Okay, well, it's absolutely in the interest of U.S. security because these are the people and the communities that are living there in areas dominated by those illegal armed groups and are the ones who are standing up to them and who are trying to build the institutions there. And also, they're the people who keep the society in those areas to account. And so the worst thing you can do is to stop starting those brave people that are trying to seek the alternatives and get rid of the narco economy and other illicit economies. So it's not just an issue of an ethnic nature, flip thing about people being Afro-descendant or indigenous, actually a fundamental issue in terms of security and stability for the country, as well as transnational crime.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marino.
All right, thanks. I think that it's very important to look where we are now and where we come from. I think that United States has been supporting the efforts of peace in Colombia with the peace agreement. That was very important for us. The support provided by the United States Congress and social sector working with ethnic communities in Colombia, a program for the Afro-Colombian and indigenous people that was established in 2010 from the US Congress, under USAID Colombia to facilitate these communities' return to the territories, allow youth, Afro-Colombian and indigenous victims of the war to attend universities, to get scholarship programs, obtain technical training to work in spaces where it was previously impossible. I think that this is how we see the life of many Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities have been improved. Now, if we take this this support, all these results have led the community along, I think that we are going to get worse in our country because what we see right now is that the legal group, they are recruiting people in the in Afro-Colombian indigenous community which live in areas far away from the big cities. And that is going to be more difficult for our community. And also, the cultivation of coca leaf is also a big problem. I think that we need more support for this community in order to improve the living condition, but also to stop the trafficking drugs and take the legal art the support, because they are now offering money to the people who join them. The people have needed. They go over there because they need. So I think that this is important to see in order to continue supporting the Colombia force and peace and building a better community.
Okay, I have a question about that anyone can answer, but definitely Monsignor, is what role do you see the private sector or the church, a group that kind of talks to all sectors of Colombian society, playing in kind of convincing the skeptics that this really is fundamental, the peace, implementing the peace accord, as particularly if the next government is more conservative. I think that they would probably listen to the bishops' conference at least, or the private sector. Do you see a willingness to come out in support of the peace accord? And how do you see those entities kind of playing a role, or is it very difficult in Colombia for that to happen?
Thank you, Claire. We are working in three different levels. The first one is at the national level with the president of the Bishop Conference of the Cardinal, Archbishop of Bogota. They invited all the president of the Republic and all the presidents of the different courts and institutions of the state to get together and to discuss a little bit how is the situation at the moment and how to reduce the hate or languages that divided more the country. So I think that was a very important step, because one of the points in the agreement is to manage to have a reconciliation process. So they try to engage all the main responsibles of the institutions to have together a common solution for that. Second, we have a very important initiative with the Ombudsman and other institutions and the international community to invite all the different political parties and movements to sign an agreement, to sign a kind of common text about the next elections, how to protect life, and how to ensure that we a climate of peace during the elections. I think that is very important. That was one of the points in the agenda of the agreement, to ensure a political climate more in terms of dialogue, social dialogue, etc. But the most important point I will stress is at the local level. We have that initiative with to promote, to support, to strengthen the peace councils and other initiatives, local initiatives for social dialogue. And through that, we can start to discuss with them, to reflect with them how to improve the implementation of the peace agreement. Certainly, we have achieved something, many things in the implementation. We have a long way to go. We have still a long way to go, but the implementation is in some way going on. And through the peace councils, we can engage the local population to work on it. Finally, I will say that this one, we have that very important initiatives, local development rural programs, and that are part of the focus, the key points of interest for the local councils. We try to engage the people to support that and to support the implementation of that development programs, because that are the causes of the illegal trafficking, etc., drugs trafficking, etc. So we can engage more the people on solutions through that council. Thank you.
Thank you. And for Angela, can you talk about why it is so important to continue monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the peace accords? And what is the unique contribution of the Barometer at the Kroc Institute for this? And it monitors also other peace initiatives around the world. And then finally, it seems that I didn't know this, but the peace accord, actually has provisions to prevent political violence in the future. And so if you want to briefly mention those things, that'd be great.
Of course. Let me maybe start with the second one that is a little bit more complex. Well, as you have heard during this briefing, recent events against Senator Miguel Uribe happened recently in Colombia, and I think this situation highlighted an ongoing and deeply rooted issue in Colombia, that is the violence against political and social leaders. And this is something that the 2016 agreement recognized as a root cause of violence, and therefore also provided several commitments that can address these type of situations. So you can see commitments in point 2 and point 3 of the agreement that might help ensure a more democratic participation and ensure political security. The first one that I would like to mention is to strengthen the comprehensive security system for politics. It still needs to be fully activated, and this will help to protect social leaders, former combatants, and opposition actors. As you have heard throughout the presentations, there's still a big issue around this. Also, to prioritize the public policy for dismantling criminal organizations, particularly those that undermine democratic participation in electoral processes. Also, to implement the long overdue public policy on reconciliation, coexistence, and non-stigmatization. As Monsignor was just mentioning, of course, with the support of the National Peace Council to reduce the polarization and prevent political violence. And finally, I would like to mention that it is very necessary to reactivate the National Political Pact to remove weapons from politics and to reaffirm a national commitment to nonviolence and democratic dialogue. So all of these measures are included in the peace accord. They have been there since the beginning, and they have been, as I mentioned during my presentation, those that have been most difficult to implement during the implementation of the peace agreement. As for your second question, the peace accord also provided different ways of monitoring the peace agreement and giving support to the state agencies, to the governmental entities that and the parties in the peace agreement that are actually in charge of implementing the peace agreement. There are different ways of different mechanisms of monitoring this peace agreement. Also, tons of transparency mechanisms that are part of the peace agreement that are fundamental, not only for the government to know what is lagging behind and what needs to be done, but also for the civil society to know what is going on with the peace agreement and help actually to move forward and push forward these different commitments. So I would say that it is very important to continue having independent monitors that are able to provide evidence-based information that show where are the gaps, where are the problems, what are those challenges that the implementation is facing, and how can those be moved forward. From different studies that the Kroc Institute has done, it has been shown how independent parties that monitor the peace agreement actually help comply with this purpose, and how those agreements that actually have these type of mechanisms within the peace agreement are actually more successful than those agreements that didn't even thought that these mechanisms should be put in place. So not only that independent monitoring, but also international accompaniment has been crucial for the implementation of the peace agreement. Yeah, I think I would leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess we only have about 5 minutes left, so I was wondering if maybe Jimena and Marino or Monsignor, if any of you have any final comments that you'd like to make, we could each give you like a minute or so, since Angela did such a nice job just now. If that's okay, would any of you like to make any final remarks?
Yeah, I wanted to say Claire, the previous Colombia government, Mr. Iván Duque, did everything possible to debilitate the peace agreement, leaving Colombia's security in a very fragile state today. This is why today the violence persists and criminal groups are, geopolitical instability continue to mark the country's future. I think that it's important to acknowledge that the art groups in Colombia have no ideologies. They are focused on doing business with drug trafficking and illegal gold mining in rural areas. So to achieve this, they need to control regions and they need to control population. I think that this is important to acknowledge, because it's before it was different with the FARC, for example. Now, I think that this is why it's important the work that the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, did with the public institutions and communities to extend global poverty and promote resilience, democratic societies that can realize their goal and full potential. I think so. Continue supporting the communities to to avoid being recruited or to continue cultivation or coca leaf is very important. And this is my call today. I know that perhaps many people in the U.S. in the U.S. government now, they are unaware that the war has disproportionately affected many groups in Colombia, especially when the Plan Colombia started. That was a government strategy against the drugs and affected the well-being of the community. In President Trump inauguration speech, this topic was was mentioned in this speech, that referred to the Afro-Colombian and indigenous community as a necessary inversion in territory. I think that is important to call that for us, what USAID did was very important. In our relationship with the Congress and the civil society is very important. And this is what I said today. The Afro-Colombian and indigenous has more knowledge in Colombia. They are more visible in Colombia because they support from the U.S.
Monsignor, would you have a final word or two?
Yes, very short. Is to say just how important has been the support of the international community in Colombia for the implementation of the peace agreement and other initiatives. In particular, I want to stress the importance of the United Nations mission in Colombia, which has a very important role, and also the role of different countries like United States and in particular the Senate to support these initiatives. We have been linked to the Bureau for Stabilization of Conflicts, the State Department, that have been very useful for us and very important support. Thank you very much.
I would just like to reiterate two things. The first one is that supporting security efforts alone will not resolve the deep-seated structural issues. And we've already seen this in the past. This is not a new thing. And it's important to learn from those lessons of what was done may be wrong and needs to be improved. That doesn't mean that the new effort is perfect, but completely backtracking to an old method that has devastating consequences for people and doesn't resolve the issues is really shooting ourselves in the foot. Also, the support of the United States beyond the military support, such as economic, social programs, support to UN, support to even governmental entities and civil society, has really been very sophisticated and very well tuned to advancing things in a way that basically tried to decrease waste and be most effective and prioritize what is most important. So I think that it's a lot of result for the funds that did go. And lastly, politically, having human rights conditions tied to the military assistance has played a major role in the past 20 or so years in allowing for back-channel debates that help reduce large-scale human rights violations, such as the extrajudicial killings, or when there was the intelligence agency abuses that took place, or even in specific situations of massacres, and also intervening in hundreds of cases of social leaders, political leaders, journalists, and so forth, who, because of their work, were being targeted and providing a political protection for them. So aside from the whole humanitarian and ethical issues regarding this, it also stabilizes and helps the country and meets then many of the mutual goals that both countries need. And then I would just say lastly that Colombia is going through some major changes, and perhaps the way that that aid is given and so forth should be different. But the approach cannot be something that is thought of at this point in time and only geared towards one individual. Why? Because governments change, and the commitment of the United States is not just to government for government, but to the people of Colombia. And those are the people who are going to be there and were there and will continue to be there, addressing and dealing with those issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Jimena. I want to thank Congressman McGovern and the Lantos Commission for inviting all of us, and for it's been so interesting to hear from all of the experts. And I hope that you guys check out the web link that was put in the comments, I think, to follow up for more information on all the different reports that have been recently published on how the peace accords are going, and different challenges that Colombia is facing and that are occurring as a result of the cancellation of some U.S. foreign assistance. It's just there one more time. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. And I hope if anyone works in Congress and has questions, they can also email me on Colombia. So take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.